He didn't look at her the way men usually did, like she was easy to overlook. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. And Tara Dyer, who had spent most of her life being the woman people looked past, had absolutely no idea what to do with that. This is the story of two people who were never supposed to meet, in a city that doesn't slow down for anyone, and what happened when the most guarded man in Seattle decided that one woman was worth every wall he'd spent 2 years building. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And let's dive into today's story. The Horizon Accessibility Summit opened on a Tuesday in October, and Seattle was doing what Seattle does best. Gray sky pressing low over the water, the kind of cold that doesn't bite but settles, quiet and insistent, into your coat and your bones. The conference hotel rose above the Elliott Bay waterfront like a blade of glass and steel, its lobby already humming with the particular energy of people who were important and knew it. Tara arrived 40 minutes early. She always did. Punctuality was the one luxury she could actually afford. It cost nothing and bought her a few minutes of stillness before the work began. She found her designated spot at the left edge of the stage, checked the lighting, rolled her shoulders twice, and let her hands run through a silent warm-up the way a pianist might before a performance. No one noticed. That was fine. That was the job. She was 27 years old, with dark brown hair she kept pulled back on working days, and the kind of face that became beautiful slowly. Not the kind that stopped a room, but the kind that stayed with you after you left it. She didn't know that about herself. She thought of herself as functional, competent, invisible in the way that made her useful. The room filled quickly. Investors in tailored suits, journalists with lanyards and hungry eyes, a handful of disability advocates who were the only people there who actually looked comfortable. Tara tracked the room the way she always did, cataloging, preparing, disappearing into her role. She didn't see Griffin Wall come in. She heard the shift, though. That particular change in a crowd's energy when someone commanding enters. Conversations dropping half a decibel, heads turning without people realizing they'd turned. She looked up from her warm-up and found him near the center aisle. He was in a custom motorized chair, matte black, moving with the quiet precision of something expensive and purposeful. 34 years old, broad-shouldered in a dark charcoal suit that looked like it had been designed specifically for the way he carried himself, which it probably had. His hair was dark, cut close at the sides, slightly longer on top. His jaw was sharp. His eyes, when they swept the room, were the particular gray-green of deep water before a storm. He didn't smile at anyone. He nodded, once, measured, at a man who approached him, and the dismissal in that single nod was so clean it was almost elegant. Tara looked away, back to her hands, back to her job. The opening speaker took the stage. Tara began to work, her hands moving in clean, confident arcs, translating in real time for the deaf and hard-of-hearing attendees seated in the designated section to her right. She didn't know Griffin Wall had stopped watching the speaker. She didn't know he was watching her. And she wouldn't. Not yet. The first break came at 10:40. The lobby filled with the sound of coffee cups and networking, that particular cocktail of ambition and small talk that Tara had learned to move through quickly, refilling her water, checking her phone, staying invisible. She had a message from her mother. Slept okay, don't worry. 3 words that meant the opposite of what they said. Tara typed back a heart emoji and slipped the phone into her jacket pocket before the weight of it could settle fully into her chest. She was heading back toward the stage when she took the corridor shortcut, the one the event staff used, narrow and poorly lit compared to the main hall, running behind the catering setup. She heard the voice before she saw him. Low, insistent, with that particular confidence that comes from never having been told no often enough. It was the journalist. She'd clocked him earlier. Press lanyard, expensive watch, the kind of man who stood too close when he talked to women and called it friendliness. He had followed her in, and now he was blocking the corridor with his body in a way that wasn't accidental. "I just want 5 minutes," he was saying, "off the record. You're the most interesting person in that room, and you're not even on the program." "I'm working," Tara said. Her voice was steady, her hands were not. "Come on, one quote. Who taught you to sign like that?" She stepped to the side. He stepped with her. Not threatening exactly, but close enough to it that the difference didn't matter. Then the corridor changed. She felt it before she saw it. The subtle shift in air, the way the journalist's posture reorganized itself almost involuntarily. Griffin Wall's chair came to a stop between them with the quiet, final authority of a door closing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "She's with me." 4 words, flat and certain, the way a fact is certain. The journalist looked at Griffin, at the gray-green eyes that offered absolutely nothing, and made the only intelligent decision he'd made all morning. He left. Tara exhaled slowly. "I had it handled." "I know," Griffin said. He didn't apologize for intervening. He also didn't look away from her, and that was somehow more disarming than anything else he could have done. "You were also about to be late for the second panel." She blinked. He was right. She turned and walked, and she could hear the soft hum of his chair a half step behind her. And she told herself that the warmth moving up the back of her neck was just the poor ventilation in the corridor. It wasn't. Griffin, for his part, said nothing more. But as Tara took her place at the edge of the stage, and her hands began to move again, precise, fluid, unhurried, he found himself watching the way she worked, with an attention he didn't fully examine. There was something in her focus that he recognized. The particular stillness of someone who had learned to hold a great deal very quietly. He knew what that looked like. He saw it every morning in the mirror. His assistant leaned down and murmured something about the afternoon schedule. Griffin nodded without hearing a word of it. He was still watching Tara's hands. By noon, the summit had rearranged itself around Griffin Wall, the way events always did. Schedules adjusted, seating shifted, the entire gravitational pull of the room quietly reorganizing to keep him at its center. Tara noticed it the way she noticed most things, from a careful distance, with more understanding than she let show. What she didn't notice was that his assistant, a composed woman named Dyer, who had worked for Griffin for 3 years and had learned to read his silences like weather patterns, had spent the better part of the morning watching him watch Tara. By lunch, Dyer had made a small executive decision and adjusted the afternoon interpreter assignment without being asked. Tara found out when she checked the updated schedule on the event app. Her name had been moved from the main stage rotation to a single listing, Personal Interpreter, G. Wall. Afternoon sessions and evening gala. She stood in the middle of the lobby, phone in hand, and felt something complicated move through her. Not quite nerves, not quite excitement. The particular sensation of a door opening that you weren't sure you should walk through. She walked through it. Griffin was in a smaller conference room off the main hall, reviewing notes on a tablet when she arrived. He looked up once, with the expression of a man who had been informed of the change and had not objected to it, which was as close to an invitation as he apparently got. "You don't have to pretend this was logistics," Tara said, setting her bag down across the table. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. It was logistics. "Okay," she said, and she let it go, because she was professional, and because some part of her didn't actually want to argue the point. The afternoon sessions were smaller, round tables, working groups, the kind of conversations where Tara had to stay close and move with him from room to room. She learned quickly that Griffin operated in a specific register: precise, economical, intolerant of vagueness. He asked questions that cut to the center of things and had no patience for answers that circled the edges. People both admired and feared that about him. Tara found it, quietly, refreshing. During a break between sessions, they ended up on the mezzanine level, overlooking the gray shimmer of Elliott Bay through floor-to-ceiling windows. The room had emptied. Griffin had a coffee he wasn't drinking. Tara had her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that was already going cold. "How long have you been interpreting?" he asked. It was the first question he'd directed at her that wasn't operational. 6 years, she said. Started in school settings. Moved to corporate events because the pay is better. She paused. A lot better. He nodded slowly, and she had the distinct feeling he was listening in the way that rare people listen, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually taking in what she said. It was unnerving in the best possible way. "You're very good," he said. Simple, factual, the way he said everything. Tara looked at him. "You watched me long enough to decide that." It wasn't quite an accusation. He didn't treat it like one. "Yes," Griffin said. He held her gaze with the steadiness of someone who had stopped apologizing for his own attention. "I did." The bay stretched silver behind him. Tara felt the warmth of the teacup in her palms and told herself it was the only warmth she was feeling. She almost believed it. The evening gala began at 7, and the hotel transformed itself for it, the way expensive places know how to. Warm light replacing the clinical brightness of the conference rooms. Round tables dressed in white linen. The low conversation of 300 people who had spent the day being professionally impressive and were now being professionally charming. A string quartet played near the entrance. Someone had flown in oysters from the Oregon coast. The whole thing smelled like cedar and money. Tara had changed in the staff restroom, which was the kind of detail she had long stopped finding humiliating. She wore a deep navy dress she'd bought 2 years ago for her cousin's rehearsal dinner. Simple, fitted, nothing that announced itself. She'd let her hair down. That was the extent of it. When she found Griffin near the entrance to the main hall, something in his expression shifted in a way that was brief and immediately controlled. A flicker she almost missed. Almost. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they weren't expecting to want. "You clean up," he said. "So do you," she replied. He was in a jacket that fit the way jackets fit when they're made for a specific body by someone who knows what they're doing. Charcoal, open collar, no tie. He looked like someone who had decided effortlessness was its own form of power. They were seated at the head table, Griffin by placement, Tara by proximity, because interpretation doesn't pause for dinner. She sat at a slight angle to his left, close enough to work, close enough that when the speeches began, she could feel the occasional warmth of his arm near hers. She focused on the words, on the signs, on everything except the fact that his hand was resting on the table 12 inches from hers, and her awareness of those 12 inches was completely disproportionate to any professional situation she had ever been in. Griffin, for his part, was barely listening to the speeches. He'd heard variations of these words at 100 events. Innovation, inclusion, moving the needle, building the future. What held his attention was smaller and quieter than any of that. It was the way Tara tilted her head slightly when she was concentrating. The way she tucked one strand of hair behind her ear between signings without breaking rhythm. The way she laughed, once, very softly, at something the keynote speaker said. A genuine laugh she clearly hadn't planned on, quickly swallowed. He hadn't heard her laugh before. He wanted to again. That realization landed somewhere in his chest with a weight he didn't immediately know what to do with. Dinner came. The conversation at their end of the table was the usual summit fare. Who was acquiring whom? Which legislation might actually pass? The polite combat of people with competing interests pretending to agree. Tara participated when addressed, deflected gracefully when the questions got too specific. And somewhere between the salad course and the main, she told Griffin, quietly, that the man 3 seats down was misquoting his own company's accessibility report. Griffin looked at the man, then back at her. "You read it?" "I prepare," she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. Then, low, just for her, "Most people in this room haven't." It wasn't a compliment exactly. It was better than that. It was recognition. And Tara felt it settle somewhere she hadn't expected, in the place where she kept the things that actually mattered. The quartet shifted into something slower, softer. The room relaxed around the edges. And Griffin, without planning to, without the buffer of logistics or scheduling to explain it away, leaned half an inch closer to her. Neither of them mentioned it. Neither of them moved away. It happened near the end of dinner, between the dessert plates being cleared and the room shifting into that looser, louder register that signals an open bar and loosened ties. A woman from a Chicago investment group had been angling toward Griffin's end of the table all evening, and she finally made her move, sliding into the empty chair on his right, laughing too brightly at something he hadn't said, placing her hand on the table beside his with the specific intentionality of someone who practiced casual. Tara noticed. She told herself she had no reason to care. She looked down at her water glass and cared anyway. What she didn't see was Griffin glancing at her in that exact moment. Not at the woman beside him, but at Tara, with the particular expression of a man checking to see if something mattered to the person it should matter to. The woman said something about his keynote. Griffin responded with 3 words and turned back toward Tara with a completeness that left no room for misreading. "I want to get out of here," he said quietly. Tara looked up. The program ends at 10. The terrace is open. She should have said that her contract covered indoor interpretation only. She should have reminded him she wasn't his personal company. Instead, she picked up her small bag from the back of her chair and stood, and they moved together toward the side exit, with the easy coordination of 2 people who had already learned each other's pace. The terrace ran the full length of the hotel's 2nd floor, overlooking the waterfront. The October air was sharp and clean, carrying the salt and diesel scent of the bay below. Most people had stayed inside with the warmth and the wine. Out here it was quiet, just the distant sound of water, the muffled string quartet through the glass, and the city glittering across the dark. Tara leaned against the railing. Griffin stopped beside her, close enough that their silence felt shared rather than separate. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, and the not speaking was comfortable in a way that surprised her. "You're tired," he said, not a question. "I'm fine." "You've been fine all day," he said. "That's not what I asked." She turned to look at him. In the low terrace lighting, his face was less guarded than it had been inside. Shadows softening the sharp edges, the gray-green of his eyes darker, steadier. He was watching her with that same direct attention she'd been trying to categorize since the corridor that morning, and she was running out of professional explanations for it. "My mom got a diagnosis recently," she said. She hadn't planned to say it. "Nothing immediately dangerous, but it changes things. Financially, logistically." She paused. "I took every event this month." Griffin was quiet. He didn't rush to fill the space with reassurance, which was the thing most people did, and which she had always found mildly exhausting. He just let what she'd said exist between them, whole and undiminished. That's a lot to carry by yourself, he said finally. I'm used to it. I know, he said, and something in the way he said it told her he wasn't just being polite. He meant it the way people mean things they've lived. She looked back at the water. His hand was resting on the railing 6 inches from hers. The night air moved between them, cool and unhurried. And then, slowly, deliberately, his hand slid those 6 inches across the railing and covered hers. Not a question, not an accident, just a choice, warm and certain and quiet as everything else about him. Tara didn't move her hand. She didn't want to. 3 weeks had passed since Seattle. 3 weeks of Tara returning to her regular life. Smaller events, Tuesday afternoon sessions at the community center, evenings helping her mother navigate the maze of insurance paperwork that came with a new diagnosis. Life had resumed its familiar weight. She told herself that was fine. She told herself the terrace and the railing and the warmth of his hand over hers had been a beautiful parenthesis, and that parentheses close. Then the envelope arrived. No return address. Inside, a single card with the Wall Technologies logo embossed at the top, and below it, in clean printed text, an invitation to a private internal presentation. A new initiative. Families navigating neurological disease diagnoses. Interpretation services requested. Her name, specifically. She stood in her kitchen in Portland for a long moment, holding the card with both hands, feeling something she hadn't let herself feel in 3 weeks, settle slowly and irrevocably back into place. She went. The event was in Seattle, in a smaller building than she expected, a converted warehouse in South Lake Union that Wall Technologies used for internal gatherings. No gala lighting, no string quartet. Just exposed brick, long wooden tables, about 40 employees, and a presentation screen at the front. Honest and unpolished, in the way that things are when they aren't performing for anyone. Tara walked in and found Griffin at the front of the room, reviewing something on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, and there it was again, that brief, unguarded shift in his expression. The one he couldn't quite control. The one that told her everything the invitation hadn't said directly. She crossed the room. The interpretation request, she said. Was that real? Yes, he said. Then, after a beat. So was the rest of it. The presentation was real. A structured grant program for families managing early-stage neurological conditions, MS, Parkinson's, ALS. Resources, financial support, coordinated care navigation. He'd built it in 3 weeks, quietly, without announcement, the way he did everything that actually mattered to him. Tara sat through it with her hands folded in her lap and her chest full of something she didn't have a sign for. Afterward, when the room had emptied and only the low hum of the city remained, she found him near the window. The late afternoon light came through the industrial glass in long, dusty columns. You heard everything I said on that terrace, she said. I hear everything you say. She looked at him, really looked, the way she hadn't let herself in 3 weeks. And something between them finally stopped pretending it was anything other than what it was. Griffin, I know, he said quietly. I know what this is. I know what it costs to let someone in. He held her gaze. I'm asking you anyway. She stepped closer. He reached up and took her hand, the same way he had on the railing, certain and unhurried. And this time she leaned down and kissed him. Slow and deliberate, the way things feel when they've been earned. His hand moved to her face, and she felt the careful strength of it, the warmth, and she thought that this, exactly this, was what it felt like when the right person finally stops holding back. When they broke apart, she stayed close, forehead nearly against his. 1 through 10, he said, low and almost amused. How'd I do? She laughed, that real, unplanned laugh he'd been trying to hear again since the gala. Ask me in a year. And if this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for them from the very first moment, drop a number from 1 to 10 in the comments and tell us how you felt about Tara and Griffin's journey. Your support means everything, and it helps more people find stories like this one. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next one.